In the heart of a bustling city filled with towering skyscrapers and endless pavements, a puppy named Buttons found itself lost. Buttons, a tiny furball of joy, had the fluffiest golden coat that shimmered under the sunlight and big, doe eyes that could melt the coldest heart. Each paw was delicately small, almost like it was crafted from the softest clouds. The ears of Buttons were floppy, bouncing with each of Buttons's uncertain steps along the crowded city sidewalk. That morning, the sun had risen, casting golden hues across the city, auguring a perfect day for an adventure. Unfortunately, it turned into an ordeal for Buttons. The leash had slipped out of the owner's grasp, and in a blink, Buttons found itself wandering alone. The streets were a labyrinth to the inexperienced eyes of Buttons, filled with towering figures that moved briskly, swarms of cars that honked loudly, and an array of smells that ranged from tantalizing to terrifying. Despite the chaos, Buttons's heart remained hopeful, a testament to Buttons's unwavering spirit. As the clock ticked and the sun climbed higher, the adventures of Buttons led to several encounters. The first was with a street vendor, known for his friendly demeanor and his cart filled with pretzels and hot dogs. This vendor, named Mr. Jacobs, spotted Buttons wandering near his cart. Mr. Jacobs had a ruddy complexion, a bushy salt and pepper beard, and wore a faded baseball cap. Mr. Jacobs bent down to offer Buttons a bowl of water, which Buttons lapped eagerly, tail wagging with gratitude. However, unable to help further, Mr. Jacobs watched as Buttons trotted away. Further down the street, Buttons stumbled upon a small park, a rare patch of green amidst the concrete. Here, children played under the watchful eyes of their guardians. One little girl, with curly brown hair tied up in two high puffs and wearing a polka dot dress, noticed Buttons. This girl, Eliza, reached out gently towards Buttons, her small hands hoping to soothe Buttons's evident distress. But as soon as a loud skateboard zipped by, Buttons got startled and dashed off once more. The day waned, and the city lights began to flicker on as dusk approached. A sense of urgency overcame Buttons as the familiar sights were nowhere to be seen. Just then, a kindly old woman named Mrs. Thompson, who was known in her neighborhood for her love of animals and her garden full of roses and daisies, noticed Buttons. Mrs. Thompson, with her silver hair tied back in a neat bun and glasses perched on her nose, was on her way home when she spotted Buttons. Understanding the peril Buttons was in, Mrs. Thompson approached slowly, speaking softly, and offering some treats she had in her purse. Thankfully, Buttons, driven by both hunger and fatigue, decided to trust Mrs. Thompson, whose gentle demeanor seemed reassuring. Mrs. Thompson led Buttons to her nearby home, her steps slow but steady. Once safely inside, Mrs. Thompson called the number on the tag that dangled from Buttons's collar. Before long, the owner, a young woman named Sarah with bright red hair and a worried expression, arrived at Mrs. Thompson's door. Overjoyed and relieved, Sarah thanked Mrs. Thompson profusely. Sarah had spent the entire day posting flyers and searching frantically for Buttons. Thus, the adventure ended with Buttons safe in the arms of Sarah, both overwhelmed with joy and happiness. The city, with all its noise and bustle, stood witness to a small tale of loss, kindness, and reunion.